Good morning. Welcome to the Explicit Podcast Measures. Dang it. Explicit Measures Podcast. Why am I keep doing this all of a sudden?
Again?
I should just read the screen a little bit more. Welcome to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy Seth. I think I need a little bit more sleep today. It's been a long week already.
The levels of tiredness drive the levels of mixing up words and numbers and all of the things.
Exactly right. 100%. Good thing I
Hello,
got my
Bauer
coffee
Seth.
going.
Hello, Puglia Tommy.
Hello, Bauer.
Carlo Mike. Nice to speak with you on this.
Okay.
Happy Tuesday.
Tuesday happy.
Yeah, we're not going to do that.
Say everything backwards today. Well, any kind of recent news or things that are coming up?
Well, I think we're all going on vacation. I think this is going to be our last live one for like 3 episodes.
Correct.
So everything's going to be on schedule. We'll still kind of be on, but we are going to enjoy our summers for a little.
We will take a little break, sleep in for just a bit here.
Sleep in.
We've been announcing this pretty much every week or every episode recently. There's a couple events coming up. One of them, which we will be speaking at. One that's another good event. If you want to go to hear things about Power BI, Excel, data things, you can go to the Data Insight Summit, which can be found at datainsightsummit.us during September 12th through the 14th. And you can use promo code 22 at checkout for $100 off. And then if you want to go to the Full Power Platform Conference, they're having that down in Orlando, Florida. And that is on September 20th and 22nd. And the promotion code will be in the comments as well. So I'll throw those in the chat window just in case. A couple events coming up that you can get some free money off of just by listening to the podcast.
Just by listening.
Excellent. Any other kind of announcements or things we wanted to kind of open up with here?
So I noticed something in the Power BI, like if you're connected to a sample data set in the new Power BI file, and I wanted to get your guys' opinion on this. Was this intentional by the Microsoft team? The load sample data set it's a financials table, has some, obviously aggregated columns like sales, product date. That being said, the sales column for total sales has a space preceding it. So it has a white space before it actually says sales.
Yes.
Is that intentional, or are they trying to tell us something?
I think I've asked for that mistake to be removed. I think it's just someone put a space in front of that thing.
Or maybe there's a reason. Maybe they're trying to say when you're creating your own measures on your base columns, it's easier to reference. I don't know. Why would that be an error that they wouldn't be able to fix? Maybe that's a good practice.
I don't know. Question.
Welcome to conspiracy theories on.
I don't think. I think it's a mistake.
You just think it's a mistake? How long have you seen it?
I think it's been around for a while. It's since the report's been out, right? Hasn't it been there forever?
If it's been there forever, so it's either an Easter egg, they're too lazy,
or your powers of perception are not as strong as you think they are.
Maybe.
I'm just saying it's the main column that you're probably gonna create a measure for.
Totally agree. Not disagreeing. There's also, if you do the get data experience, you go to get data experience and grab a sample data set. Each Power BI desktop installs with a sample Excel file of information you can use. There's also a column naming issue in there as well. Same thing. It's like a space in front of a name. I think it just happens.
Interesting. Okay. So you think it's just a bug?
I'm not reading into it at this point.
All right. See, I went down a rabbit hole. Like maybe that's how you're supposed to use your display column names because they're easier to reference.
I mean,
you wouldn't know.
When I was creating measures a while ago, I would, if I wanted the measures to go to the top of the list, which I do feel like if I'm writing measures in a table, I feel like I should have the option to be able to sort all measures together and all columns together, instead of what happens right now where it kind of
folders.
But everything is in. I use folders not for that, but before we had folders, there was like no way to like kind of group the measures together, and it's like it makes. I do find I name my measures a little bit weird now, so instead of doing like sales this year or year to date sales, last year, prior year sales, right? Those would then alphabetically sort them in a weird way. So I would do sales and kind of like the context of what the measure's doing, and then add, whatever the calculation I'm doing is to the end of it.
Yeah.
So I feel like that way, at least the measures are grouped together. And I made a script in Tabular Editor recently that does sum of. So if you're doing like a lot of summing of columns, it does sum of the column name, which is descriptive of what the measure is doing. So kind of calling out the measure, but then all of those are grouped together because they're all sum of something. But then it falls apart when you have like average of.
Unless you add
So
a
are you
space.
sure it's a blank space, or is it a special character?
It could be a special character. When I was in Tabular Editor, that's when I noticed it because I'm like, I was typing and it said it was wrong, but it looked like it's just a simple white space leading white space. Maybe that's how you sort your measures. That's how they got away with it. I don't
That
know.
would work though. If you put a space in front of everything, then it would make them all grouped together.
Mm-hmm.
You're not changing the name at all. Well,
And
visually, you're not changing the name.
use people using Tabular Editor trying to reference the measure name.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Joe says he uses everything with an underscore.
Underscore is another one I've
That's
seen a lot. Yeah.
I've seen that a lot too. Another good pattern. Kind of
I
groups
do
them all
that
together. Stop.
with the display folders, like with the
Yes.
same thing with the tablet editor scripts. Everything, both columns and KPIs, they always have like 2 underscores just to make sure that they always go to the top.
When I write variables in DAX, I will use the underscore. So I will do, if you're
Oh,
writing a
yeah.
DAX statement, and then I like using the underscore because when you use the autocorrect or the auto
IntelliSense.
in IntelliSense on the measures, if you use the underscore, as soon as you hit the underscore, all of the variables that you made inside the DAX statement would automatically appear. So I kind of like that pattern. I think that works well for me.
Sounds like a good one.
Yeah, a good tangent on that one. I'm more interested about this article, Tommy, that you found that was around the custom visuals update. Did you guys see that one, or have a chance to look at that one? That is interesting to me. So July 24th, Microsoft team on the blog pushed out an announcement. You can now manage your licenses and licenses of visuals through the Microsoft App Source. I don't know if you guys remember, but Marco Russo has OKViz, or the SQL BI team makes OKViz, which is I guess it's an arm of SQL BI that makes custom visuals. And he was very vocal about the buying experience for custom visuals inside Power BI is not a very well thought out pattern. You had to like buy the custom visual, and you had to enter in a license key. On an individual person level, this worked fairly well because you'd go out and you buy the key and you'd have it, and you'd enter the key into the visual and it would work. Great, everyone's happy. But when you have organizational level visuals that you want to go buy, if you want to buy the visuals for the entire organization, you have to share the key with every single report builder. Not nearly as ideal of an experience. I think this is trying to address that. You can assign a license to it for all Office 365 users.
Well, they've done a lot too with being able to access custom visuals. We had one of our earlier episodes was on do we use custom visuals, and we're like, oh, the ability to browse custom visuals is terrible. Then they immediately updated that. You can sort, search. So, and I think they're seeing more custom visuals. There's a lot of new ones that I haven't been able to discover. So, and I think people are really making they're really making a business out of it where they're also getting a lot of success from it too. So to me, it makes
Yeah,
sense.
but part of the man, this is exciting actually, because part of the challenges that Marco brought up way early on, right, was the onus to not only create a visualization, but do all of this management of like all the back end stuff with Microsoft. Then you
Yeah.
have to people are licensing it, and then to Mike's point, passing around a key, and now you have
Yes.
multiple different users, and they're extending past the user, but they don't know because it's just being passed around. And like this is really streamlined, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm interested in building a custom visual, it certainly looks like if I go through this process and I want to charge for my custom visual, I have a framework and a platform to do that now, right? Like
Hmm?
I would basically do probably some of the same things as far as creating the visual code, it getting, verified and recognized, but then it almost seems like this would be a Microsoft saying, "All right, we'll take it from here," right? Like you we'll manage whatever the licensing fees and stuff like you are. We'll take a cut and here's the rest of it, right?
And I think to
No.
me, it's like Microsoft already has the distribution network built in.
Yeah.
It's already easy for you to get and find and discover visuals. Just make it easier for me to purchase them and manage it. Because, I mean, to your point, I've made a
Yeah.
couple custom visuals that have not been on the App Store, but to get through the App Store submissions, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of extra work to get your visual certified and in there. And, you know,
For what benefit, right? Because
exactly.
technically, and I think that's where we land a lot of time in some of our conversations is you have um, all these third party plugin, right? Third party tools and whatnot. And this
Yes.
this really brings those custom visuals to the forefront into the platform. You can manage the licensing. It probably makes that conversation a lot easier with IT or security or what are you bringing into our environment? No, I don't want you to use that custom visual. Oh,
Yes.
okay, now it's in Office 365. I can manage it. We can do these things. Like it brings a lot more legitimacy to it because it's part of the Microsoft, you know,
Ecosystem.
delivery and ecosystem.
I like it. I
Yeah,
think I'm
I wonder if this will actually launch or put more out there now for people to spend more time developing custom visuals to put into here.
There's a couple companies who've already jumped on board with this. OK Viz, the one I talked about earlier,
Yeah,
they already have their bullet chart and Calendar Pro already working through this licensing model. Another couple of ones that uh, Zoom Charts is another one that I've seen that is also joining in, and then
yeah,
InfoRiver looks like they've got a couple as well. Those are the ones that I've kind of played with before previously.
yeah.
Um,
Lumel, like CloudScope.
yeah,
CloudScope's got a couple. Okay, Viz too, right? Like
Hmm?
you mentioned that
Yeah.
earlier, but both
Yeah,
the Marcos are in there, the Bullet Chart and Calendar Pro.
yeah. So I think I'll be interested to see where this
I'll have to
goes.
keep an eye on
One thing that
it.
just kind of rubs me the wrong way, again, I don't want to give the developers any less credit here. It's a lot of work. I definitely want to
Yeah.
give them 100% credit. It's a lot of work to maintain it. It's a lot of work to get these things in the store. Totally think it's a good thing. However, what I would say is I don't like the fact that I have to pay for visuals on top of paying for a program that already provides me visuals. Just kind of irks me to some degree. So I'm like, I get it. It's open source. You can let people build all these other custom things, and your quality, I think, goes up with the visuals that are paid for. I do think the quality level is higher than ones that are not. But on the other hand, I'm like, I don't want to have to pay for it. I'd rather just work on Deneb or Articulator to own it outright and build what I need to build.
Well, at some point in time, though, that's a rate. It's a diminishing rate of returns, right?
It's
Like
true.
you talk about
Right.
the value of your time outside your job in your other life, right?
Totally agree.
The court, I mean, the ten
Hmm.
percent of it not being this one,
Yes,
and how valuable that is.
totally.
But in this case, like we can't. Yes, we have the tools to go build all this stuff ourselves, but can we? No, right? I
True.
think we didn't. I think we had a custom visuals episode. Like, what I would like to see though is if these are getting um, full treatment of being part of the platform and licensed, that they work a little bit better in terms of properties and
More consistency.
fit and function across with other visuals in Power BI,
Yes.
because some of these are super custom, right? Like
Yes.
they don't, no matter what, they're not going to fit in with any of
Yep.
the other visuals unless you do some tomfoolery. That's my latest.
Yes.
And
I don't
on
even know where that comes from. I should probably look that up. Like saying something that like everybody's like,
and honestly, too, some
don't
of the
say that.
custom solutions, especially the map ones, I'm fine with there being a price on it, especially when they have, I think, when it's not just the visual itself, right? I think like ArcGIS, I think Open Map, like you have to have the license key, but they have a whole portal where you can log in and really configure it at like, add the reference
Hmm.
later to their own portal
Yep.
and add something that you wouldn't be able to do in really any other feature. I do see where you're coming from with some of the custom visuals where it is just an enhanced standard visual. But I think with a lot of them, they're providing something that is really just like an add-on with some of your other data too, which makes it that much, I think, we'll say valid in terms of having a cost structure to it.
And again, I'm not trying to say no, don't ever use this, but I mean, some of the, I think the price for the custom visuals of how I see them being priced today currently, it just seems too expensive compared to what I'm already paying for Power BI Pro. I mean, I'm thinking like, okay, let's have this in comparison. I don't know. That's just my thought, my line of thinking for that one. And maybe the value, maybe the visual value that it brings is so great that yeah, paying as much for Power BI Pro as for these other visuals, that might make sense for what you're doing. Um, my opinion here is I just would rather use open frameworks as much as I could to build what I need. So
Some people just want to have a visual that expresses exactly the way they want to see it.
it's maybe the camp that I sit in. Anyways,
My goodness.
no clue. All right,
Trying
move.
to lead in.
Yeah, right, right. Let's jump into our article for today. So actually that topic of custom visuals and custom visual updates is actually a really good option here. Because the article for today, and I'll put the article actually in the link here in the chat window. This is what we're going to be discussing today. Link to article. It's all around visuals and looking at the expressiveness of your visualization. Kind of a really neat article, good read. Tommy found this one. He said, "Hey, check out this article. This is a really neat it's got a perspective, kind of giving you certain balancing things. Really going into, and this is an area of study that I think is actually fairly well known with people studying what visuals make the most sense. Some of the Gestalt principles that we like to use when we build visuals or work on reports. You know, removing clutter, putting things together, aligning things. Some of the visual guidance that we work on, because I think it makes it for a better reporting experience. But in this article, he goes through and basically really kind of tears apart and diagnoses. There are different ways you can visualize the same information. What is the best way to start sharing some of that information and conveying um, those insights in on top of the visual? All right, so I'll pause there. Comments, thoughts, things you guys want to start? Anything that stuck out to you guys in the article?
I mean, yeah, this is a deep one. It's definitely, it's we didn't say who. Enrico Bertini,
Oh
right?
yeah, I'm sorry.
Enrico Bertini,
Mhm.
who's a collegiate academic professor. So I love these articles because they go deep. This
Hmm.
guy's got time to think, man.
Yes.
Right? And the whole, I think the context setting for this article for me is specific around like um, there seems to be a theme when talking about visualization in the academic settings around um, precision being like the thing that always leads the conversation going into visualization. And throughout the article, it's great because he brings in why we can't, I think, rely on just one or two factors independently, but
Mhm.
we have to think about what we're trying to express in a visualization. And he dives into all of these nuances and differences and makes an argument for not relying on just this, pick precision and then the visual tool that you're going to go with, and then it'll whatever you choose will land the best.
Mhm.
Yeah, I literally just had a conversation actually with a client yesterday, and they were talking about standards and guidelines in terms of like, well, how much standards, like guidelines should we do? And I knew this episode was coming up, so it was like obviously I was doing the reading, and with that, I was like, well, without getting too philosophical here, I'm like, there's obviously some universal guidelines, but in terms of what do you actually want to give the author, like someone developing the report, how rigid should their the layout be, the canvas be,
Mhm.
compared to honestly like allowing them to express it. And I think for us with Power BI, this the article and the argument about being able to show the expressiveness, I think really is unique for us as Power BI professionals, because a lot of times we're not just dealing with one particular report. I think we always have to think about the context of well, yes, we are developing a report. It needs insights, it needs the data storytelling, et cetera. But in the context of an organization or, in an environment with 100 reports that are out there where you can be expressive, but at the same time, is it does it remove the experience for a consumer where they feel like they're in a new system, so to speak?
One of the things that I find very interesting how this word is or how he's articulating a couple words here in this article. He talks a lot about the visual channel. What is the channel of the visual doing? And so I'm going to unpack that a little bit because I think that the visual channels linking to something inside the visualization makes a lot of sense. And so this is a concept that I use a lot when I work with Deneb and particularly Charticulator, because you have, and I do a talk, and actually I'll be doing this talk at the Data Insight Summit. I'll be doing a full day session on working with Charticulator and working with Deneb, which are two custom visuals that are free that you can use and go build your own kind of whatever you want custom visuals. But there is a more of a learning curve that goes with them. So I've taken the time to kind of learn them, spent a lot of time building things in them. But this concept of a visual channel, what visual channel makes the most sense for your visual?
Right.
And I really liked in the first part of the article, he goes through and articulates a couple examples. Hey, I was anticipating people, like they had one for some crash incidents information. So people that were injured in crashes in a certain borough, I think in like New York City, there was an open data source set and basically said, here is some data. I'm looking you to stack rank things in kind of this area. And so some people came up with some interesting visuals, some bar charts, a scatter plot showing correlation between two data points. And so I'll go back to this channels terminology that they're using in this article. A visual channel is some kind of property about a visual. And it could be a visual channel could be the height of the bar in a bar chart. The visual channel could be the color of the data points on the visual itself. What is the color palette or what is the color spectrum that you're going to use on the visual itself? So that it's this concept of like there's a variation in a channel of data, a column essentially. You basically could probably put it that way. There's a column of data that is linking itself to some kind of property inside the visual chart. Oh gosh, the other chart that I'm thinking of here that escapes me that I've been playing around with a little bit was it's a bar chart that not only graphs the bars by height, but it graphs them by width. So I forget what that is. Do you guys know off the top of your head what is the name of that chart with bar chart that adjusts both the height and the width? I'm gonna have to Google this
Is
one.
it a violin?
Violin's another good one. I was actually thinking like it's I think it was like a specific chart type. Someone maybe in the chat. There it is. Marketo, Mariketo. How are you sure you say it? But that's another chart that I've been experimenting. But again, this is another. It's in the chat window. Yeah, a Miko chart. That's what I'm thinking of. It's like a bar Miko chart. So the idea is the bar not only does the height adjust, but the width of the bar can adjust also for an additional property. So you get this another like visual layer of information that the depth of the bar also makes sense as well as everything else. So I found that's kind of interesting. There's some interesting visuals out there that are also showing. Let's say you have, you know, sales dollars on the y-axis, and then you have some sort of percentage of sales or percentage of margin on the x-axis, right? So now you can see, okay, where did most of my sales come from, and how much margin did I apply to those sales ratios? So the idea is you can get some more insights out of what that's doing. Anyways, another kind of interesting type chart out there.
So for you guys, because I think when I was reading this and it was one of those either, oh no, kind of reactions for myself in terms of thinking all the reports that I build, because I've generally stayed with, if you're gonna do a grouping, it's gonna like just like Marco Russo's or the other like the
I'll,
visual cheat sheets, right?
yes.
So it's like, anything that's grouped by with the bar chart, if it's date, use a line chart, et cetera, et cetera. But and that's that precision, right? Where, that's the best practice that we always keep in mind. Um, but the precision side of this is interesting in terms of what are we really trying to convey? Because I struggle with this all the time, and I think, Mike, this is probably why you really dived into Deneb and Charticulator. Is
Hmm.
there's only so many times you can use a bar chart, right?
True.
Um, and there's in then with the custom visuals, it's not doing exactly what you want it to do, because you don't want to. You're trying to convey a certain message, and once you get trying to get that message, you generally we're obviously a lot of us we know how we feel about pie charts, even though I think Enrico even makes the argument there is a place for it, which I do agree with.
Correct.
But generally, you're not seeing the whole spectrum of visuals used in a normal report, right? I would love to see the market share of standard visuals used in reports to see like table, matrix, bar chart, line chart, but just to see like what is everyone using, and is that really conveying what the report's purpose is? But the idea of to be a little more expressive, but like highlighting something in a bar chart, like with different colors, even though that's not necessarily best practice, but in the context of is trying to convey that message. I really like this idea of trying, rather than think, oh, okay, group bar chart, of a different way to put this. But again, I'll reserve my where I have my concern with this. But to me, it was a bit of an eye opening article.
I liked his analogy. Like, and there's a couple moments in here in the article that there were some additional thought points that I thought were very relevant for me and things that really stuck out to me. One was his choice of color. There is one chart that he has. It looks like a mapping type thing by zones or regions, and then he does halfway down the page. It's a visual where he uses on the left hand side. He's using a diverging color scale, so starting from a lighter color going all the way through to a darker color. That conveys different information than a diverging color scale where he started red and went to like dark blue. And so there's this concept of what are you trying to convey? And this is, I think, where he started talking about the expressiveness, right? What some of these visuals are going to invoke some sort of emotion. The color palette you pick is going to inherently draw your eye to something. And so in this example, he started talking about, well, I wanted you to understand that there is a point of data that is like neutral, right? This is kind of, maybe this could be something around like sentiment scores or sentiment about something, right? You have those questionnaires you get all the time. I strongly disagree with this one, or I really agree with this one. And then there's kind of like that neutral zone in the middle there that really is, what kind of action you're going to take on, like, yeah, it's just okay. It's just middle of the road, right? And so with that kind of information, you're trying to convey an emotional pool or convey some emotion that the users are giving to you based on their feedback. I want you to think this is really red. Like, I really disagree with this view or opinion or whatever the survey thing is. Would I ever
Right.
recommend this tool to somebody else? No, I most certainly would not. And then you would understand why. So that is a color you would want to invoke. That is a bold color comparatively to the middle of that range, which would be kind of in the, okay, I'm okay with it. So that's in his example, he went from that red to the dark blue, but the middle of the chart was all white, had no color. So it was kind of drawing your eye to the ends of either the data points, which was kind of interesting. So I liked this thoughtfulness of how he's conveying these things. Like, it really does matter. Just a diverging color doesn't make sense. There's other thoughts to put in place here that would help you digest or even again push the user towards making a decision one way or the other. It's important. That's the what he's calling the expressiveness of the different visuals.
And I'm not sure if it's in this article, but I know it's been in. He's referenced this book in another one. I think Chris Wagner, he did his book study on this book by Brent Dykes, Effective Data Storytelling, and it's something I was trying to follow along with Chris, but it's very much again in that context of we obviously have our standards from a visual point of view, but we need to do a better job of that really true narrative of, I think the effective storytelling didn't really seems more geared toward like infographics, not necessarily. I wasn't really made in Power BI in mind, but thinking about this in a different way where we just have a summary page and then the drill through page,
Hmm?
is that always the best use case? And I'm finding situations where it's like it's hindering the purpose of the report rather than helping.
I do like the fact that you brought that up, right? Because I think a lot of these articles are specific around how do you pick and choose a static visualization, right? Like,
Right.
and there is a significant difference between something that we would present that would always show these, very limited changing if we did allow it to change, or if it's a static, image. I do think though that the conversation is still relevant because I don't think we've spent enough time discussing the best way to visualize data,
Hmm.
right? And the the article alone, even in the comparison that Mike was pointing out, he does this in multiple points where he's talking
Hmm.
about his different channels, like the magnitude channel getting too much um, uh, emphasis and not enough on the identity channel, or a way to express what
Yes.
what the magnitude means. And just in doing the two comparisons between, oh, what if I choose magnitude alone? What if I, use expressiveness in that? What if I do too much expressiveness, right? The comparison and kind of playing around with visuals is something that, like, I typically try to do every time, right? Rather than get stuck in the rut that you kind of talked about, Tommy, of like, I always do this.
Right.
I always just use the bar chart, right? Maybe I
Yes.
need to broaden my scope and say, hey, if I have two or three elements, like, and I don't want to use a pie chart, right?
Correct.
Should I use a stacked column to represent that there's an entity around these data points that should be grouped together,
Hmm?
right? um and this is where these this thought theory around visualization specifically is always worthwhile to dive deeper into, even though we may not have an application for it all the time, because we create reports that could instantly blow up the perfectly aligned, bar chart or representation of, a specific data set, but it doesn't work when we introduce a different variable through a slicer. um, it forces us to think about the best way to shape um, what we're trying to convey. And I don't want to jump to to the end, but I'm going to, right? A phrase of his at the end I'm going to totally steal is, he says, we do not visualize data, we visualize ideas based on data. And that
Mm,
struck me
yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's
That's a very
100%
profound.
true,
Yes.
right? Like, because
Yep.
you don't get the meaning behind data just by looking at Excel, right? Or
Yep.
hundreds of rows of columns or tables of information. You get meaning behind what we're able to represent with the data and the data points, right? And then it becomes a conversation. And
Yes.
that nuance is so powerful, because that's what we discuss on a daily basis, is like finding meaning. And we always say, like I've always said, finding meaning in data. Well, you don't. You find the meaning in the idea based on
Behind
all
the
of this
data.
work that we do,
Yeah.
right? And it's the shaping of the data in a way that is presented to end users that allows us to make informed decisions, especially with the volumes, right? And this is why Power BI gets me excited all the time, right? I got my goosebumps going,
Yeah.
because every conversation is, to me, extremely exciting to have when I foresee how, like, going through the this deep struggle of cleaning data and transforming it and shaping it and modeling it and creating all these measures, like I can see mentally kind of what the impact to the business could be based on presenting those ideas in the best way. And this is, that conversation around, like, you do all this work, but we don't spend enough time in that final layer of how do we best communicate that idea through these visualizations. And this is where Enrico spends his life, right? And why a lot of this thought theory around visualization is an important topic to have, or conversation to have, because it's the final handoff, right? We've talked about, like, data accuracy and timeliness being something extremely important for end users.
Hmm?
Visualization is one of those things that they don't even recognize you're doing, but you can strengthen or harm the ideas you're trying to communicate when you
Yes.
have that type of report where you're shaping, being very focused and trying to convey a message.
Another interesting idea, or not necessarily idea, but I think component with us with Power BI. And to be honest, I've always personally struggled with is I felt I was much more analytical before Power BI came out. And let me explain. So in the days of Excel, and I was dabbling in R to do the exploratory and descriptive analysis. It was something that, for any new data set, it was always easy to do, to kind of say, like, okay, what are the outliers? And it's something I did with every data set that we kind of touched. And most of our requests weren't just creating reports. Again, before the Power BI days, it was, dive in, tell us what's going on. And really providing, sometimes it was a PowerPoint at the end of the week, or a few slides on this given project. And that allowed, in a sense, dictated a lot what we're talking about here. You can't really be expressive if you don't know, if you can't really pin down the whys, right? Because usually we're like self-service. You can click on a bar chart and it will filter for you. You can do, the drill through, and it will bring you to a page. But we sometimes don't even know where the outliers are, or if they asked us for our recommendation, like, what should we do about sales? Like, what products are performing well or not? We're like, well, it's in the report. You could just filter this and then you can find out.
Mhm.
And I find that getting in that rut more than getting before Power BI, because it's easy to build. It's, we're doing the modeling. But for everyone else who's not dealing with a tabular model, who, like, the data scientist, so to speak, or I think also too, Bernito and a lot of the visual books out there, they start with R or Python to do that descriptive analysis, to, kind of understand and filter out. And, it's more project based or ad hoc based than it is, in a sense, a standard report, which I think does change how much we're going to be expressive.
I mean, I think those are all really good points there. I also, while you were talking about that, Tommy, I was thinking to myself, like, this also speaks a lot to the visual space, or the visual level of your team. How much can your team handle, or
Mhm.
people that are consuming the reports handle, right? I keep going back to the concept of, okay, in this article, I'm looking through and reading through what he's got going on here. Some really good visuals. I almost feel like this is like an exercise I would take if I was going to build visuals for like the New York Times, or magazine, or something that is like I can really spend some time honing in, like, what is the story? We're using data to tell an informational idea, like to your point earlier, Seth, the very conclusion of the article, right? But I'm also looking at this going, I can't expect everyone at my organization to be in the same level of thought, of thinking around these things that I am. And so I had to, at some level, I'm not going to be able to throw it. I'm not saying to not do this, but I'm also thinking there's definitely other use cases that when we talk about Power BI reporting, or things that we're producing for the organization, there are some places where you want these reports to look, the message, the story there is very designed. On the other hand, sometimes there's just a lot of people who just want access to data. And even if you gave them a really high quality, very well thought out visual, would they just skim over it? And even though you spend hours and hours of time on this, would they just skim over it and get over to the, all right, let's right click, drill through, okay, export my data kind of thing? So again, it's one of these, I feel like it's one of these balance things, right? Am I trying to tell a story? Am I trying to articulate that data story through my information? Or is it just we need access to data? I need to be able to filter some things down and get the data out of the system.
Yeah, I don't by any stretch of the imagination think that one would spend an inordinate amount of time comparing visualizations, like for every single report that
Agreed.
I'm
Yes.
checking, right?
Yes.
Like this is most definitely relegated at the very high level,
Yes.
at least to those reports that we have a story around, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we need to analyze this segment of business to understand or track or keep track of, right, this these metrics, right? You're much more in the refined space of um, quick quick understanding right? Understand what is going on with
Yes.
the business, the area. How do I get my green, yellow, red, right?
Yeah.
Is there a better way to convey, some of the nuance within there? Like really thinking about something that like a dashboard, right? That could be used a lot by many, many people on a
Hmm.
daily basis. Like this, the impact um, equals the amount of time it would take to properly choose the right visual or get it to lay out, the way. I think that's the use case for spending a lot of time in here
Yeah.
versus, saying, let's change the industry. And every time we build a report, we need to spend 4 hours on every visualization to make sure we
Right.
have the right thing, right?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to say that we're doing that. I guess what I'm pointing at here to some degree is this is an interesting article to just really kind of tickle your mind around. Okay, what is the choices? Like, I think it's the nuanced choices, right? Am I making a bar chart and making it a rainbow chart because they have a whole bunch of colors on it? Does that make sense, right? And I think there's maybe this other kind of step where you're in your normal visualization realm or process. Maybe you're taking 1 or 2 moments to sit and pause and say, what am I really trying to convey with this information? What does that look like? And then just taking a step back and saying, should I add a colored bar, or should I just keep all the data bars the same color and shade them, or put a gradient on them? I think this is where what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to extrapolate this article into like what does this do to change my daily workflow? What
Yeah.
does this do on the day-to-day thing? And I think
Well,
in the section here he starts talking about a whole section around what can we do, like what are things that we can do today that will help you leverage some of these principles. And I thought it was really interesting was around an issue that he brings up here is how do you find good design recommendations, right? How do you expose yourself to something that is outside of like just drawing bar charts all the time? And he kind of points to or alludes to here, you go read books of people who've already done this stuff. Like I thought it was very, good.
Yeah.
And he gives a couple of recommendations. Alberto Cairo, I think is how you say his name. Is that
mhm.
He's a Tableau guy.
But he does a lot of really good books on visual. It doesn't really matter. I mean, visualizations at the end of the day. So I really liked like the fact that he's pointing out here's a couple of real books that you can go look at that have a lot of good examples of like, hey, here's the problem, here's how the visual displayed itself. And so I really liked his idea of being able to like, hey, you don't know what you don't know. You've got to go research this to some degree. This is part of our homework for us as we go down this visual route. We need to spend time. He refers to Tamara Munzner's book a lot. I don't know what that book is. I'll have to go look it up, but there's a lot of references to that book as well. Um, this I need to do more homework to make sure I understand the spectrum of what you can graph.
I think to Tommy's point earlier though, like how would you, like, we're having this conversation and we know because we've spent a ton of time teaching visualization, right? That in general,
Hmm?
the Power BI crowd does not spend a lot of time in the space, right?
Totally true.
Um, what are things I'm kind of thinking of Tommy's comment about a wide adoption, or like having people be able to express, like report authors build reports that express themselves but still stay within standards, etc. And this kind of leads me to thinking that an implementation approach that I could use here is, what are some of the key concepts that I would want my report developers to always just at least think about, right? Not spend tons of time in making sure we've honed down the specific right visual or for the use cases that we talked about. But is there a cheat sheet of, I'm not telling you what to do, but Mike, even in your position and direction conversation,
Yes.
like getting people always to think about whether or not they're presenting that data in such a way that it's conveying something when it needs to, as opposed to, yeah, we have to make some tables, and sometimes it's just a table and a line chart, and that's the best you can do.
Correct.
But are there some of these key concepts, and maybe taking some of these channels, right, and saying like, hey, magnitude, like think about how this is being presented in a page. Do you want to lead with the greatest problem, or do you want to lead with the best version of something, right?
Hmm.
Why would you want
Right.
to do that one over the other, or something like that? So I think there is some area within here for us to take out some nuggets and do broad strokes or add into our process right, in report building that we could share out with teams, most definitely.
Here's the crux though, or here's where for me the rubber meets the road a bit. And I did mention this in the beginning, but I really do think it's really relevant for us in the Power BI in the Power BI industry or the Power BI world, because again, that idea of the data scientists doing the exploratory and the ad hoc slides, that's not really what we're doing with Power BI, right? Again, we're dealing in the context of this report does not live usually in a vacuum. You may have a few ad hoc reports, but generally speaking, we're building reports in the Power BI app, shared in the Power BI service, and in a sense, in relation to other reports in a tenant.
Mhm.
So that ability to be all expressive in one end, where you have the details and you have this very color coded thing, this very set path that is completely out of the experience, or in the sense a style guideline that all the other reports are. I think there's a line that we have to manage with that, where we just can't say, hey, you're really good at exploratory data, go at it, make everything a scroll, use the infographic, custom visual, go crazy when you story tell. um I think there's a threshold, or there's at least a line that we have to manage there.
I think a
I
lot of
mean,
yeah. Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I would say, yeah. I mean, you can't let people just do, go the Wild West, right? Because then you lose some of that overall consistency in report theming and things that you would create templates for in general, right? Like
Yes.
Right.
you work with inside the box, but at the same time, there's a lot of different ways you can express yourself within a specific visual, or present some variation.
So I guess what are some of those components then for you that would be, in a sense, you would uh, lengthen the leash, so to speak, and where are different areas that you would make sure that you'd be more, we'll say, rigid?
I mean, I'd probably be more rigid around the colors and themes. Like if
Mhm.
if you're generating certain look and feel, right? I can't have and it's all a certain theme, and then you drop bright red into everything, or a vibrant lime green. That's going to be more disruptive than anything, right? Like the variations and allowing people to express themselves is within this palette of colors. what is what is the bad, what is the good, have at it, right? Like I don't
Right.
care what you do within a visual or how you would represent. I mean, I care, but how the variability of like if you have an argument of why you want to use that particular visual and it makes the most sense to present the data in that way. If you want to add cell highlights, so it's easier for your eye to pick up the good and bad in a matrix.
Hmm.
If you want to use spark lines, if you want to, like, if there's a reason for something to be on the page and it conveys more information, or like faster for the end user to understand, like how to navigate, get to the, concepts that they need to faster, then it makes sense. If it's just adding clutter,
Sure.
or you think it's pretty and there's no real meaning to it, or it's not really doing anything for the aesthetic to the page, then there's really no need for it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I mean, so there's been a little bit of notes here in the chat window talking about just some good books to go look at. I'm just going to call out a couple of these, but I think for me, how do I implement what we read in this article today? It's really around. I think for me, the takeaway is I need to do more homework. I need to do more homework on how to align insightful information to appropriate visuals. So, Jeff gives out a number of books here that he really likes. Storytelling with Data, The Big Book of Dashboards, The Big Picture book around just dashboards and visualizations. Alberto Caro has a How Charts Lie book as well.
Mhm.
So I think there are some pitfalls that people typically fall into. I think um, How Charts Lie is an amazing book. I think it was very well done. And it gives a lot of just, hey, you didn't know what you were doing. You built the visual this way. This is how this chart is lined to you. And so I've been able to avoid some things. So I think visualization is building is not only conveying information with good visuals, but also avoiding mistakes by by not making bad visuals in a way as well
Right.
too. And I kind of stand by my thought here around, when we talk about building reports, I usually talk about, okay, we need to define the insights. And I think if you just even step back to a high level and say, of these visuals I'm putting on this page, or even looking at visual by visual or groups of visuals, because I would technically call like a group of KPIs a single visual, even though they're multiple visuals together. It's conveying a singular idea. I think your idea here is, what action do I take after I look at this? You just keep kind of put something down, build something. What is my action? What do I do now? And I think if you just kind of keep that, to me, if I keep that lens in my my thoughts there, it helps to some degree pulling up, what is really influencing my decision. What do I do with this information when I'm done? And then even conveying that. It's like I've been doing something now, a recent technique where I'll take a visual and I'll pair it with a little bit of text. And I'm building a lot of visuals for external people that are not familiar with the data or the data model. They're literally looking at a page of information and need to know what to do with it immediately, right? So then I'm giving like helper text that more on the page, less visuals, more helper text. This visual shows this. Here's how I interpret it. Here's what I'm doing. And so to, again, help the user understand, when I look at this, what is the action that I'm trying to get to?
Yeah, I think in general, like the two key things that I take away from this article are this one. I'll probably come up with some standards for provoking kind of thought for the general group of developers, right? As you're going about things, like, hey, keep these things in mind.
Yeah.
There are some concepts that when you're producing this visual, it's always a good idea to like just run your mind through this, as opposed to dimension measure, like XY. Here's where it goes all the time. We only use bar charts. That's the standard. That's what we do.
Yep.
To get them to think about, like, is it really the best way on a day-to-day basis, working still within that framework? But the more thought-provoking one is, from coming out of this article and its depth, is for those specific use cases where we're going to be investing a lot of our time. I think it's also important for us as Power BI developers to think outside the box, right?
Yes.
Don't just limit yourself to the straight up out of the box visualizations, right? Like we have Deneb, we have like these custom visual libraries that we can build, but at the same time, think about a person who did an amazing job of coming at this from the complete opposite direction is Miguel Myers, right?
Yeah.
Think about the concept and the idea that you want to convey on your report page, and find a solution of, maybe it's a combination of visuals, right? Maybe it's transparency. Maybe it's like building a visual from 3 or 4 visuals, and like a lot can be done. And when we have these like extreme wow, like, oh my gosh, like not only is this report page just absolutely beautiful, it conveys everything I would need to know.
Yeah.
Right. That's the type of stuff that we can do if you kind of unblock yourself from thinking, I'm always in this box, I have to do this thing. Power BI is a very broad platform that we have a lot of capabilities of thinking through different things, and different ways of conveying those ideas and messages through our reporting. So, like, always worth just trying to think, what would be the best way? Like, if I didn't know I had the crappiest table in the world to use, but I had to convey some raw data, like, how would I do that? Right? Maybe there are different options out there. So, yeah, love this type of conversation. Love diving into the visual layers. So it's been fun.
I think there's a lot of things here that are good notes here. One of the hangups, and so as a final thoughts for me, right? Educate more, right? Focus on actions and insights, and conveying what is the story in the data. And I think like I get too hung up sometimes on the visualization itself is not the output, right? It's what you do with the information after you look at it. What does that invoke in you emotionally around the reporting? I think that's a good takeaway. The only other thought I'm thinking here is, I don't know what I don't know. And so I find myself continually educating myself in other techniques within the Power BI ecosystem of how to build visuals. I follow a lot of YouTube channels. I follow a lot of people who build things on LinkedIn and Twitter. I follow a lot of articles. And I have this growing list of backlog of articles I've read around, hey, I built this visual and it went this way. This is how I did it. Right? There's a lot of, to me, there's a lot of need here for how-tos around here's the problem, here's the challenge. How did I build the visual that in this certain way? Because there's actually a number of like, again, Power BI has a framework. I've talked about this before. It's a framework, and if you stay within those bounds, you can build a lot of good things. But to your point, Seth, like thinking of combining multiple visuals, thinking of what are the colors and how do I want those to convey? What are the UI UX part of the visuals and how they interact? That's another area that is just the community is awash with really good ideas around how to influence that and improve that. So I think that's something else I'm going to be more in tune with, is to keep learning and keep pushing myself to absorb more of these other scenarios and how to leverage Power BI to build these kind of visuals. You know, it's easy to say, oh yeah, you can make a heat map. Well, what's the best way of doing a heat map? And you could probably build a heat map 3 different ways. Which one's going to do what you want it to do in the report?
Yeah.
Do you use Deneb? Do you go find a heat map off of the app source? Do you go build a heat map using a table inside Power BI with standard visuals, like with color formatting? Like what do you do? What's the information there? So anyways, I think that's a kind of another interesting topic you can diverge into as well. Tommy, any final thoughts for you?
I think one thing I want to really bring back to my report development, and again, it's funny though, because we always talk about the turnaround time to building reports, but this podcast has been great because we've talked about so much about the scoping, asking those questions, and a lot of times we may not get the right answers because people never been asked, what actions do you want, what questions are you trying to solve from this report, because now they just see us as, show me the data. But bringing back that exploratory side on, if I am connecting to the data set, that I can find the outliers, be able to find something to, in a sense, provide the expressiveness. I'm not going to be expressive for the sake of, look at me, I have an artistic viewpoint, but I think much more, trying to find outliers. If someone's like, I'm actually really looking for this, dive into the data and try to actually point that in the report. The data will change, sure, as it gets refreshed, but at least providing some narrative on what what we think they should be looking out for.
Totally agree. Awesome. Well, this is a really good topic. Really like the article. The article is linked in the description of this video YouTube link. So if you want to go check more about the article, I'll also try and go back and edit some more or add some more links here for all of the different books that we discussed and talked about throughout the conversation here as well. I'll actually just right now see if I can throw them in the chat, just in case people missed them before. See how many of these things actually make it in there. But here's a list of books that we were kind of discussing and talking through as well through the podcast. Anyways, thank you all very much. Our only ask is, if you like this podcast, if you found some value from it, please share it with somebody else. Let someone else know that you found some interesting value from it. What you kind of pulled out of it. Maybe there's a nugget here that was insightful to you. Share that on social media. We'd really appreciate it. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere they're available: Apple, Spotify. All of our previous podcasts are there, ready for you to listen at any time. And again, we'll be going through next week. Always 6 a.m. Actually, our podcast will come out, since we will be pre-recorded, or join the conversation live. You'll still have us on chat, 7:30 a.m. Central.
Excellent. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you soon.